You're listening to La40 with Katerina Cozias, only on LA Talk Radio.
I love the music, right? Like the producers got that amazing music for me when I started. I said, I want something pumpy and jumpy, even though it's like in the morning for us here in LA. And they got that awesome song, which gets us pumping in the mornings. I'm your host, Katerina Cozias. You're tuning into LA40. And yes, again, I'm here all alone in the studio, but that is because we have an amazing phone guest that is lined up for this program. So the question is, guys, what would you do in your life with your day if you woke up every day and you knew you could not fail? Right? Concept. Because most of us don't do things because we're worried about failing. But the only way you're going to make it in life in terms of being happy and joyful and feeling fulfilled is if you do something that you love doing. So I'm so pumped because we have transformational teacher. He is world acclaimed, has helped millions of people to basically tap into the truest version of them. He is the author of the new book, Pivot. And we delve into the art and science of reinventing your life and your career, right? Can you reinvent your life later in life? Should you? This is one of those questions, right? Should you tolerate living in something that may not be 100% the way you want it to be? Or should you take a step and try and change it? But does that become more difficult to do as we age? And the one thing I know, guys, through all of the interviews that I have done over the past few years is that there definitely is a tipping point. There's a tipping point that happens in everyone's life. For some people, it happens at 30. For some people, it happens at 60. But you get to a point where you look around and you say, is this really where I thought I was going to be by this age, right? Is this really the way I wanted my life to turn out? And a lot of times the answer is yes. And if it is yes, awesome. Then you're doing something right and good for you. Share the secret with everyone else. But if you're not, don't worry, because there are things you can do to make changes in your life right now. And Adam himself has a really fascinating story that he's going to get into with us. He was an attorney, a high-powered attorney in New York for many, many years. And literally woke up one day and thought, I'm not happy with what I'm doing. Had a wife, had 4 kids, was at a point in his life where the prestige was, he had worked damn hard to get there. And unfortunately, just it wasn't equating to fulfillment. It wasn't equating to happiness. It wasn't equating to a lifestyle that he thought, he really wanted to have and have for his family. So he pivoted later in life and moved into the sphere of personal development, personal transformation, working with T. Harv Eker. For those of you that are into this stuff, T. Harv Eker is the author of Millionaire Mind, and has been instrumental in had built out the one of the premier coaching programs in the world called Peak Potentials at the time. Has since become New Peaks. But T. Harv Eker is massive in that sphere, and Adam Markel joined him and actually took over for a little while as CEO of Peak Potentials back in the day. So he's got a lot of information to share with us on things we can do, how we can make a move, especially if you're feeling stuck. Because it's when you're feeling stuck that you have difficulty moving forward. So I think we got him on the line. Let's check it out. LA Talk Radio, Katerina speaking.
Hi, Katerina. It's Adam.
Adam Markel, I'm so excited that you're on the phone because I have just been giving you a little introduction here to our audience. How are you?
I am wonderful.
Perfect.
Awesome to be with you today.
It's funny, Adam, because I was telling them a little bit about your book, Pivot, which is a must-read. It's going to be a must-read for anyone that wants some great Christmas holiday reading. They have to pick it up. We're going to tell them a little bit more about it. But the funny thing is, Adam, I was just giving them a quick synopsis, and I definitely want you to go into this with us about your own pivot from, high-powered attorney in New York to transformational global thought leader. But I wanted to tell you that the funny thing is, Adam, guess who visited me in my dreams last night? You did. I'm not even joking.
No way.
You showed up in my dream last night, and I'm starting to believe in all this stuff. And I was thinking, you know what? He and I are going to be vibing high because the energy you were projecting in my dreams last night was awesome. And don't worry, guys. There's no funny business going on. He's got a beautiful wife named Randy, and she's awesome. But you were in my dream, Adam. And so I thank you for visiting me yesterday and for showing up for our audience today.
Oh, what a pleasure. And yeah, I don't believe in coincidence. I don't believe in any randomness. This is without getting too woo-woo, I guess. I just think things are always happening very much by intention, design, and on purpose. So thank you for having me, and I'm glad I got to visit you last night in your dreams as well.
Absolutely. What I want to talk about, Adam, is, I definitely want to get into this idea of pivoting. Because what I was saying in the introduction is people, they roll around, they go through life, years go by, decades go by. I mean, I'm sure you remember Y2K, right? 1999. And, we're on the cusp of 18 years later. Where have 18 years gone? And how can people going into 2018 set themselves up in a way that they are crafting the life of their dreams? What are some of your tips for people who say, I want to pursue a passion, but I don't know what my passion is?
Yeah. Well, there's so much in that question. So I'll just start by saying the obvious,
okay.
Which, we've heard, but we don't always follow this advice, which is that to have something new show up in 2018, there's a good chance you have to do something differently than you did on the cusp of 2017. And so the planning process is really important. People want plans and they want strategy. And I think that's where they get security. They feel more secure with a plan. And I'm going to shock people when I say this, but it's not time for a plan. It's usually the problem to me is usually that people move to planning too quickly. They move to strategy too quickly. And really what has to happen is the process of discovery before that. Because oftentimes we're just sort of, Band-Aiding, putting Band-Aids on things that are wrong in our lives, trying to solve things in the most convenient or the easiest way. And long-term improvement of our lives is a commitment. It's not an interest. It's not something we're interested in. It's something we're committed to. And that's more process-driven than it is strategic in nature. It's not that we won't get to planning and that we shouldn't. It's just that it's the cart that has to go after the horse. And that's the important thing to recognize. So, yeah, coming into the new year, I love the work that we teach because it's process work. It's process on how it is that you create something new in the new year, starting with what's really important to you, what you've learned, what wisdom have you gained from your experiences thus far. So, I think coming into the new year is very much a getting back to basics. It's getting back to a foundation. And that's why I love the work that we do at Pivot. The Pivot book is great work. We work with folks in that area of reinvention. And you told a little bit about my story. So I've been a kind of a serial reinventor, if you will, for many, many years. And primarily that's because we don't reinvent once, we don't pivot once, and our lives just work out perfectly. My wife, Randy, and I, we're married 28 years, which is amazing.
Amazing.
On two levels. One, that many marriages, many relationships don't last that long, so that's amazing all by itself. And the other amazing thing is how fast 28 years goes by, right? It's just shocking, that way. And we've had a house in a beautiful island off the coast of Massachusetts for many years as well. And we would go there in the summers with our kids and make that a place for us to get back to basics. We've made it we call it base camp, because we do some relationship work and work with some couples as well. And this base camp is a place to take deep breaths. It's a place to think. It's a place to make time to think so that you can be more grounded and more driven by what's going on the inside, so that you get in tune with what's on the inside to be able to create new things on the outside. And at this beautiful spot on this beautiful island, we've been for years driven over this little waterway on this bridge, on a drawbridge. And we were driving over across that bridge some years ago and noticed that they were building something next to it. So we stopped and we asked, and they said, well, yeah, we're building another bridge because this bridge is probably not going to survive another one of these nor'easters. We get one and it's going to go down. It's an old bridge. So we said, oh, that makes sense. You know, they're building a new bridge, and it took a couple of years and a couple of $1 million to do.
Of course.
And I thought, wow, that's such a great analogy for pivot, that so many people think that they cannot change their lives because what they have to do to change their lives, whether it's the career that they don't love, the job they don't love, the business or relationship or health or something, and they think, well, I've got to jettison the thing that's not working. I've got to quit my job. I've got to move to a different part of the world. I've got to get divorced or whatever it is. And they have this sort of extreme view because that's what the media has really perpetuated, that we have to go all in. We've got to burn our ships or jump ship and that kind of thing. And that's a real devastating fallacy. It's a myth. And the problem with it is not that we do that and make a mistake. What happens is, because people think that's what's required to make a significant improvement in life, is that instead of making that, bold step, take that leap of faith and jump and risk it all, push the chips in the center of the table, burn the bridges. Instead, they do nothing. They think about it. They might complain about it. They might talk about it. They might make resolutions even, New Year's resolutions.
Right. Yeah, that's coming up, right?
Nothing comes of it, right? Because they're the fear of putting it all on line and risking even what they've got, which might even be mediocre. It might be less than what they truly believe on the inside is even possible for them, and yet they won't risk that for the unknown, for the uncertain. And so what we do is we make ourselves stuck. We get stuck and stay stuck because of fear. And so when I saw that bridge thing going on, I knew what a great analogy it was for pivot, that you don't tear down one bridge before building the other one. You build the second bridge right alongside the first one. You build it, and then when that bridge is able to create some result in your life, it's functioning in some way, meaning in this case, cars could drive over it. Well, then you know what happened. They built the second bridge and they tore down the first one.
Right.
And that is very much an analogy for pivoting, that you don't have to jump ship. You could start something new on the side. So if you really want to be an entrepreneur, you want to own your own business, you want to make your own hours, you want to stop building someone else's dream and start building your own, you want to write a book, you want to do any number of things, you just start building that second bridge. Now, here's the really fun and ironic thing about this. So we watched this whole process go on. It took years, a lot of money. All of a sudden, and now they've got this beautiful bridge, this new bridge.
The new
We're driving
bridge,
over it.
right?
Sailboats go under it. It's a drawbridge. It's way cool. It's a little Cape Cod place. And then all of a sudden, we see them building again. So we stopped the car, Katerina, and we're like, "What are you guys building now? What is going on?" The Army Corps of Engineers said this. Said, "Look, the second bridge, the bridge we just built, was never intended to be the permanent bridge.
What?
It's temporary." So they started building another bridge, and it took a couple of years and more millions of bucks. And when they were done, they have this magnificent bridge that's like, I don't know, 100-year bridge, right? And I thought, well, this is even more apropos for the discussion of reinvention and pivoting, because we don't pivot once and it's done. It's a process. And so, yeah, we built a second bridge, and maybe that's going to be the one that takes us for the next 3 years or 5 or 10. But likely we're going to build yet another bridge. And that's the way that we utilize the law of the universe. One of the most significant laws of the universe, without getting, again, too woo-woo about this is a truth. The universal truth is that everything changes. The seasons change. Light to dark every day. The sun comes up, it goes down. All of these things are changing. That's the constant. It's an oxymoron, but
why? But that's the thing, is people are so afraid of change, and yet you're right. It's happening all the time. It's actually a constant. I love
nature.
that. So how do people get around that fear of change?
That's the point, is that we build these bridges so that we learn how to utilize change. We're not looking at change as a negative or something that is supposed to bring fear. It's supposed to bring growth. It's intended for growth. That's the process of it. And sometimes growth is painful. Sometimes growth is scary. I'm not saying that you don't have fear. Right. I'm not saying that you won't be scared. What I'm saying is that if it stops you from allowing a natural process, a natural evolution of growth to happen, well, then you end up stuck. You end up feeling mediocre. Your life just ultimately stagnates. And we know that anything that stagnates long enough becomes toxic and ultimately is extinguished. So we've got to embrace change. We've got to embody, and that's the pivot process.
And I
so,
think it was you.
Yeah.
I think I had been listening to something of yours online. This was about a month ago or so, because you've got some great stuff. Anyone that's not following Adam Markel, please make sure to do so after this program. But one of the stats you threw out there, and I'm sure it's valid, is, and I actually thought it was a little bit low, to be honest with you, but 50% of people, literally 50% of people, are waking up in the morning and not liking what they're doing for 8 to 10 hours of their day. Like, that to me is a travesty, because we do have a finite amount of time on this earth. And so to be living, as you said, in that place of mediocrity, of complacency, when we have such finite amounts of time, and we should be out there killing it with our passion and our gifts and our pleasure, it's just incredible. There are, in your book, Adam, you talk about some of the myths. I want to get into this because I've heard some of these from people that I know are not necessarily satisfied with their day. They're the myths that people talk about when they say, that they give for why pivoting won't work for them. So number one, you say that, you identify that people say that pivoting is for other people. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I think people often look at others. They might look at you. They might look at me or someone else and say, well, that works for them. They were able to do it because they had some advantage. They had some more education, or they somehow got lucky. Look, this is what draws us back to our earliest childhood programming. I mean, everything that we've created in our life is a result of the programming that we received when we were children. So we're doing things habitually, often unconsciously, which is another way of saying habitually, and we're not more consciously creating new things in our life. And why we don't consciously create those things often is, again, the root of it is the fear of making mistakes. Almost everything can be divided into two columns, sort of on a T-chart, on the side of love and on the side of fear. And we know what love creates and what it feels like. And we know also what fear creates, but we don't always recognize where we're being run by fear. So when we're young and we're in school, we learn very early that when we make mistakes, there are consequences.
Right, yes.
So if you ask us a question, the teacher thinks it's not a good question, or the class doesn't think so, you could be ridiculed, you could get bullied, you could get bad grades, you come home with bad grades, and your parents, they punish you. There are consequences for making mistakes. So consequently, we're taught, we're trained, we're programmed to not make mistakes, meaning to make the fewest mistakes in our lives. And so what ends up happening is we are through our actions and through our thoughts, cultivating the status quo. We are protecting the status quo. We are protecting
even if we're not happy with it,
mistakes.
right? Even if we're not happy with it, that's what gets crazy.
But then we complain,
right?
but then there's this huge complaining and this misery that that we're not happy. That's why those statistics you quoted, they're shocking. They're crazy because 53% of people are in jobs that they do not want to stay in, meaning they're actively looking for a new job. More than 1 in 2 people are looking for a new job, and 80+% of those folks are not in the job that would be their dream job, the thing they're called to do or want to do. I mean, I heard that. I couldn't unhear it. And just like you said, so they're perpetuating their misery by playing this story in their head that mistakes, that if they make a mistake, if they stop doing what they're doing, that somehow they'll crash and burn. Their income will stop, the money will stop, they'll lose their home, they'll be embarrassed. People won't respect them or will criticize them. I mean, there's all that going on. What I'm suggesting is that you don't have to put your life at risk. You don't have to risk everything to simply go after.
You don't have to tear down that first bridge until the second bridge is built, and then guess what? You probably need a third one, so relax. Right?
That's
right.
Well said. Yeah.
I love the bridge analogy, though. Like, how perfect.
It struck us. We were just like, wow, this is amazing, because even in my own life, having been an attorney and waking up in the morning and
talk to us a little bit. I'd love for you to share your story, because I didn't do.
What's that?
I was going to say, I didn't do your story justice. So share your story a little bit with the viewers. And I want them to really understand where your passion is coming from, because you were in a place where, you know, you could have decided to be stuck for another 20, 30 years, but you chose to move through that. So can you walk us through sort of your evolution? I would love you to do that.
Sure. Yeah, no, happy to do it, and happy to do it in the sense that I get to relive my pain for just a couple of minutes here.
Just for me, do it for us. Do it for us.
So when I talk about mediocrity, I mean I was a poster child for it from the inside, meaning I had things that other people defined as success.
Right,
so
because from the outside, you were damn successful, you know.
Yeah, I started as a school teacher, and I went back to school, became a lawyer. I created a successful law practice, had a lot of clients and money and houses and cars and all that stuff, and a beautiful, amazing relationship with my wife and 4 healthy kids. And yet I woke up in the morning in the dark often because I got up before everybody else did, and I put my feet on the floor, and the thoughts I had to start the day were often thoughts that were anxious, that were thoughts of dread, feelings about what I was going to be doing that day, which was to sell myself for money. I would be selling my soul, is what it felt like. To do a job that you don't love, to do something just for the money, it degenerates and it hurts us on the inside. And you do it long enough, it can cause a lot more than just, you know, the internal damage. So yeah, I went on like that for year after year, putting my feet on the floor and feeling that way. I practiced law for almost 18 years, and for probably 10 of it, I felt like a fraud. I didn't consciously think that way, of course. I just was unhappy. How did it show up? I wasn't unhappy when I was home or with my family. I was so grateful for them. But every other moment of the day, which was 12 to 14 hours of the day, I was easy to get angry. I was anxious. I would feel anxious. At times, I'd have to drink lots of coffee to stay awake because I'd be tired. I'd have trouble getting to sleep some nights and really feeling that anxiety to start the day. And then one day I was driving actually with my wife on a Saturday, and we were driving, and I pulled off this side of the road, and I got out of the car, and I went around to the other side, and I asked her to get out and switch. And so she thought, well, he's just got to work again. I'm used to this. Right. He's a workaholic. And I directed her to the hospital, local Freehold, New Jersey hospital, where I got out, went into the emergency room. She went to park the car. She doesn't know what the heck is going on. And I get put in a wheelchair and hooked up to electrodes. And the next thing I know, I'm on a gurney, and my wife is now in there. Randy's standing next to me, and the doctor walks in, and she's pale. She's white as a ghost. I'm sweating profusely. My heart is pounding out of my chest. And I'm thinking to myself, I cannot believe it's ending this way. Wow. That I'm not going to see my kids today. I won't see them come home from school, and I don't even know who I am. I don't know what kind of a person I've been playing at being, and this is how it's going to end. And so he walks in, and he says, Mr. Markel, I think he didn't pronounce my name right. He says, Mr. Markel, and I'm going to tell you right now, because I know what you're thinking. He says, you're not having a heart attack, and you're not going to die today.
My God.
And in that moment, in that pause, Randy and I looked at each other and started to cry. And I mean, like, not cry a little bit, like it was waterworks. We were bawling because I had this, it was just so, it wasn't even a relief in that moment. It was just like knowing that I was getting a second chance. That somehow in that moment I realized it wasn't over, and it wasn't over for me. I didn't have to continue to do it the way I've been doing it, and watching the people around me, which were a lot of other lawyers and a lot of other people in New York City where I had one of my law practices, who were just like the walking dead, dead in the eyes, just lack of feeling, lack of a pulse, really, but yet still alive. And that's who I was. So in that moment we cried, and then we left the hospital that day holding hands, and I looked up at the sky and I said, thank you, God. And I had not used those words before. I was not a religious person by any means, and in that moment I found a spiritual voice for myself, because I realized that I had been given a second chance, and I had something that I wanted to do with my life that was different. And so over the course of 2.5 years, Katerina, we built that second bridge. And that's how I was able to transition out of doing work that was selling my soul for money, that was soul sucking. I mean, I'm not saying that about the law profession. It was me in that profession was not a good fit. And I didn't just say to myself, well, hey, or Randy didn't say to me, you know what, we've got bills to pay. We've got responsibilities. We knew about that. I knew about that. And that's why I didn't just quit my job or move or, pick the kids up and go somewhere else. We planned to do something different. And I didn't know what the plan was that day, but it evolved, and I got curious. And that's what the book is about. How it is that you, and that's what our communities on Facebook and in the other places where we work with people who are reinventing their lives, we start in that place of curiousness, of the curiosity that you had even when you were a kid, before you were trained to think that if you make a mistake, your life is going to go down the tubes. I remember when I was a kid, they used to say, if you get bad grades, you get in trouble with the principal, like it goes down on your permanent record,
Right, and that's scary. That's a scary thought when you're 14 and 15 years old, and you think if I fail this test, if I get a bad grade, that there goes the rest of my future, and it's so limiting on a child.
It's terrifying. Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you did do it in parallel. You paralleled into what? How did you decide that, okay, law is not my thing. I've been very successful at it, but now I want to motivate people. Did you tap into that? Did you want to go back to your roots of a teacher? How did you decide to fall into personal development, personal transformation?
Yeah, well, the term that we use for this is that I entered the pivot phone booth. So I entered the pivot phone booth much the way a lot of people did originally, which was that I was told, get a good education, study hard in school, get a good job, so that you can earn a lot of money and someday retire, and then you'll feel good about your life.
And you'll get the watch.
And that was the process, right? I'll do something to have something to someday become something. And I watched that till I was almost 40 years old, and that wasn't working for me. And so the process that we teach in Pivot, the art and science of reinventing your career and life, is that we have to first identify what's clouding our windshield, meaning we don't have clarity. That's why we can't drive in a assertive way on the road. We can't be in the fast lane of our lives because we're just not clear. We still have all that caked on stuff from the past and all that programming and all those beliefs and things that very much don't allow us to move forward with confidence because we're not clear. So that's part one of the book. And part two is, what is it you do to create new behaviors? Because our life does not change if we continue to do the same thing. That's Einstein's, it's not a theory, it's a fact, right? You do the same thing again and again, you get the same result. And if you think it's going to be different, that makes you insane, right? So we don't want to be insane. We want to do new things so we create new results. So the behaviors are really a part of that. The ritual, the things that you do at the conscious level, so that you change the results in your life. So it's clarity followed by behaviors, and then you get to the place where you can plan something new. We can create a strategy for it.
Well, what I love about your book, Adam, is not only, like you said, do you talk about gaining the clarity, and then you give people practical tips on how to identify some things that they can change in their life, but at the back of your book, you actually have offered a 21-day plan. You call it the Pivot Plan, and it gives you a day-by-day guide on what new things you can introduce into your life to help move you from a place of fear to a place of passion and clarity and belief in self. So again, big shout out to Adam for having written this book, but also for having, decided to use it as a tool that can be a roadmap to people. And I love that you and I are having this discussion in December, Adam, because it's such the perfect time. People have this feeling in their heads that, January 1st, I'm going to change my life. And we know the stats. By January 30th, 80% of people have fallen off that wagon. But if they follow the tools and daily practices and make those changes in their lifestyle and in their belief system, then change can take place. Absolutely. So you're in the phone booth. Yeah, you decide you want to jump in the phone booth, and then what? You're going to come out as Clark Kent? What happens?
No, you go in as Clark Kent. You come out as Superman.
Oh,
right?
That's right. So or Wonder Woman.
I went in the phone booth as a student, as somebody that was a student wanting to use that theory of study and come out as something, and I didn't know what to come out as, like a lot of people. So I came out as a lawyer. That's what I went in. I went in as a student. I came out as a lawyer, and I didn't question that until 10 years into the practice. I started questioning on the inside and observing those other symptoms. And again, there's a lot of people out there listening. You know what those symptoms are. Sometimes it's being tired, or it's being anxious, having anxiety. That doctor told me, hey, you're not dying today. He says, you're not having a heart attack. You're having an anxiety attack. And
but you know what you want to do?
Deeply into that.
Yeah, you wanted to do
too much coffee, too little sleep, too much stress. This is what happens, right?
And I was going to say, you wanted to do everything so that in 10 years you're not actually really having the heart attack, right? I mean, that was absolutely a wake-up call that I'm sure you're thankful for every day of your life since then.
He told me that he had people, men and women, that came in at my age that weren't as lucky. And those words really dropped in for me. And I wanted to do something about it. I just didn't know what. So as you said, I entered the pivot phone booth one way, came out the other as a lawyer. Then I re-entered the pivot phone booth because this is about identity. So in that area of the book, we basically have divided the book up into two parts with 6 sections each. And in that first part, when we talk about clarity, we've got to look and examine our identity. So I went at an early age and decided my identity is I'll be a lawyer. Some people, it's a dentist, a doctor, it's an accountant, it's a sales trainer, it's anything, a writer, an artist, a musician. We create an identity for ourselves, and what's a part of the problem, I think, is that we're not taught about this when we're in school, so we don't do a lot to examine who we really are and what our gifts are and what we want to be in our lives, what we want to create in our lives. So we do things by default often to make money, take care of our families, all that kind of thing. I re-examine that later on. So fast forward into my late 30s, I go back into the pivot phone booth to examine who am I, what is my identity, and what do I want to come out as. And what I did learn in that process, that exploration, and my being curious about it, and also in pain, I went in and discovered I love teaching. I love teaching, and I don't want to be a teacher. I was a junior high school English teacher. I didn't want to go back to that. That wasn't my brand of teaching. I wanted to be around people who were actively working on themselves, adults, young adults, and adults that were my age that wanted to be entrepreneurs, that wanted to start things up, that were rebels in some way, even like me. I didn't want to have a job anymore. I didn't want to follow somebody else's rules or plan for my life. I didn't want to build their business. So I started to build that second bridge, and I came out of that phone booth knowing I want to teach. I want to be able to help people. And so I started to speak that. I got lucky because on some level I didn't have I don't want to say I got lucky. I was blessed that my family, that my spouse in particular, didn't poo-poo the idea. She didn't tell me that's ridiculous, that's foolish, don't do it. She encouraged me. But again, I didn't tear down that first bridge either, so I didn't put our lives in great jeopardy at the time. And so ultimately, I started to teach things that I had learned about business. I started to teach people about what I'd learned on a brand new spiritual path, which had me just wanting to express my heart and be a channel for love in all my relationships and all my
so different from the Adam you had been, right?
Yeah, totally, exactly. So here's the thing that I think is really poignant. We don't have one identity when we're born, and it doesn't change. My experience is that our identities change over time based on who we are, who we've been, what our experiences are, and who we're spending time with. And so it requires us to examine that identity at various points. And when we know that something's not right, when we have these signs from the universe or God or whatever you think, wherever we get messages from that something's not right, then what's happening is we're in a pre-pivot stage and phase. We are pre-change. And so either we ignore those things or we do something about it. So you can actually design a pivot, and that's what I did. And then there's also this other kind of pivot when you lose a job or someone dies or someone leaves you or your business crashes and burns or something like that. And those are pivots by default. And so when we work with people, and again, people that have read the book and people that also access some of our online trainings and tools or a part of our Facebook community, we're working with people that are pivoting either in two ways. Either they're designing it because they want to be proactive about not fearing change but wanting to utilize it, create alchemy in their lives that way, make a change, turn something that's negative into positive or lead into gold, that kind of thing. Or there are people that have had something happen. There were signs, they might have ignored those signs or whatever it is, but now the change is on their doorstep, and they're either in a bit of shock about it or they just don't know what's next, and they want to figure that out. That's where the pivot process really meets them there, with this something that is really tangible on that discovery side, and then when it's the time, which, like you said at the back of the book, is a 21-day plan for action. Because nothing in our lives, nothing in your life or my life is going to change just thinking about it or creating great intentions or meditating about it. We actually have to do some new things, and that's where having support, pivot people, we call them, learning how to be resilient, what it is that resilience comes from, how do you create resilience, more resilience, what are the rituals that will support you in being an entrepreneur or getting to a different place in your current career or changing relationships to your health. Any of those things will require resilience and rituals. And these are all sections of the book that we teach, because they're ways of being that are different than the ways of being that we currently have.
Right.
And that's why I'll use a big word, and I don't mean anything like grandiose about it, but it's transformational. And that's when we challenge the status quo. We make a small change. It could be reading a book. It could be taking an online course. It could be going to art school. It could be anything. My brother's a lawyer as well. He loves art. He created a pop-up gallery. He didn't quit his law practice because he loves art, street art, graffiti art. He just rented a space, created a pop-up gallery, which he thought would be just a couple of months. It ended up being almost a year, where he was showcasing different artists and selling the art, brokering the art. And did he make money? Of course. It was a good business decision, but it was really about his passion.
I was going to say, because that was fueling his soul. You know what I'm saying? That was fueling his soul. And this is the conversation I have with people all the time, is they say to me, oh, I'm working at the bank and I hate the bank and I really want to be a landscaper. And I'm thinking, okay, great. You don't have to quit your job and put everything at risk yet. Why don't you just start gardening on the weekends? Why don't you see how you can explore introducing that passion into your life in a way that is a little more cemented, rather than having it be a pipe dream up in the air somewhere. And that will get your passion flowing, that will get your creativity flowing, and probably, as you said, that'll help move you into a place where you're more of a content person overall, without, as you say, having to burn the ships, right?
Yeah,
absolutely.
You can't just stare at your phone. I mean, look, I love to watch videos on YouTube and all stuff like that, because I'm a constant, never-ending learner. But you just can't stare at your phone and expect your life is going to change from that alone.
And I have to say, because I agree with you, I have pivoted twice in my life so far, and both times, Adam, it was a 180-degree life change, and both times my life did nothing but get perpetually better. Every time I decided to make that commitment to self, to pivot into something new, and I went, originally I did exactly what you did, right? I went into school as a student and I came out as a finance major, and I started working in banking and corporate finance, and I did that for almost 10 years. And then, just before I turned 30, I thought, what the heck? I never liked this 10 years ago. Why am I still doing it? So I went into the phone booth. I decided to come out the other side, and I was doing something that was a little bit more in line with me, which was communications and media and marketing. But I was doing it kind of behind the scenes, and I got involved. I got really lucky, and I got into this cool industry of yachting and manufacturing and traveling the globe, and it was amazing until, something started speaking to me 10 years later that said, yeah, this is great, and you're kind of on your path, but you're not really on your real path, which is actually you're supposed to be in front of the camera. Actually, you're supposed to be having these kinds of conversations and helping to fuel them. And then I repivoted, Adam, again, similar to you, in my late 30s, and I am so on fire right now with where my life is at. And you know what? Maybe I'll pivot again in 10 years, and that's okay.
It is, because you won't be afraid of it, for one thing. It's natural. Remember, we said this is nature. Right. So this is a part of what the natural way and evolution of life is anyway. And yes, it makes your life bold and interesting, and it's not this sort of what Henry David Thoreau described as people everywhere living lives of quiet desperation. That's the part that's brutal to me, is that we'll blink our eyes and we'll be at the gate, be at that ending moment, and we'll only be able to look back in that moment and answer for ourselves honestly, how did we live our lives? Did we live it on our own terms, or did we live it out of fear and out of obligation?
And you know what? I'm
complaining all the way.
And complaining all the way. I'm going to quote you directly. This was something that jumped out at me when I was reading your book, page 188, for those of you that do go and get it. Page 188, this is Adam directly. In hindsight, each setback wasn't just an obstacle, nor was it a test. Each disappointment was, in fact, an opportunity to get better, right? We can't be scared of failing. It's only going to push us in the right direction. I think that's brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, every once in a while, a thought gets clear, right?
Every once in a while, there's something in there.
Paper, right?
That's so funny. I want to touch on. I want to touch on something here, which I think is so very important. You talk about how most people do something to have something to then be something, but you say what they should do is flip that upside down and actually work in the direction of be, do, and have. So instead of doing, having, and being, be, do, and have. Can you explain this a little bit?
Yeah, this is the part I think we could adjust the training in our schools early on, that we want kids to learn early on. And we're all big kids, so it doesn't matter if you're 65 years old or you're 35 or whatever other age. This is a great time to learn it, and I had to learn it late, which is that we want to focus on being. We are, it's a cliche at this point, humans being. It's humans becoming. Being and becoming is what we're about. That's the evolution of our humanness. Doing is this thing that could be anything. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. said that there's no such thing as menial work, just menial pay. So we could be digging ditches. I mean, there, but for the grace of God, we're doing what we're doing. But we could be doing many other things. And it's not what we're doing, it's who we are. Like it or not, we take ourselves with us everywhere we go. So you want to move to the Sunshine State, or move to palm trees, or you move to the cold, or you move to the mountains. Nothing changes. You bring yourself with you, unless you're working on yourself being the best version that you're capable of being, the potential that you have inside of you. Nothing on the outside will ever make you happy. Yes, things will change. You might get a bigger house. You might have palm trees in your backyard instead of, some other thing. But you yourself will not be different. So our evolution as human beings is, my view is that we're here to regenerate our souls, to express our souls in the most beautiful way possible. And that means that we've got to be attuned to ourselves. And when we're attuned to ourselves, when we're attuned to what it is we're here to do, what we want to do, what we're called to do, when we're present to that, it will direct us. It will inspire us. It will guide us to do certain things. We'll do things because of who we want to be in the world, how we want to show up, how we want to feel, how we want to experience ourselves.
And going back to what you had said a little bit earlier, I think once you start to listen to that little voice, right? We all have it, whether it's coming from your head, whether it's coming from your gut, whether it's coming from your heart. The more you start to tune into it and listen, the more it knows which direction to take you, and the more clarity you start to have with respect to that windshield of yours, right? So I think it's so vitally important. And it's funny because I'm going to go back to something you said at the very beginning of the program, the top of the hour, about taking time for yourself and just really focusing and disconnecting. Literally, this last week that passed, I disconnected from all of society, and I do this annually. No phone, no laptop, no Wi-Fi, no clocks, no alarm clocks, no nothing. I rent a little Airbnb up in the hills, and I go and I sleep when I want to sleep. I wake up with the sun. I go to bed with the sun. I take time to just allow myself the stillness to create. And I try and do that December, January, so that I start the year off right. It's incredible how much we get distracted with things. They say that most people average an hour and a half a day on Facebook alone. An hour and a half a day, Adam, on Facebook. Like, just imagine what you could be doing. And I'm not saying anything against Facebook. I love it. We're actually streaming on Facebook right now. But my point is, how many distractions are we allowing into our life that are detouring us and deviating away from our ability to tap into that little voice, right? And I think that if you want to pivot, you know, don't be scared of that.
I believe that the root of everything we're talking about is a person's trust or lack of trust in themselves. And when we talk about that being to doing, you know, being that leads to doing that leads to having, which is different than how we're taught and programmed. Being, what's amazing about being is that you learn to trust yourself. So I love what you said, because it's our mission on a deep level to help people to learn how to trust themselves at a greater level, because that's where the pivots become clear. That's where you get to just serendipitously do things, meet people, things fall your way. You end up having the Midas touch when it comes to things. Things are just, you know, again, oh man, it's just such serendipity how that happened, and synchronicity and all these things. And you go, well, how did that happen? It's because you trusted yourself, your inner guidance. So that trust comes from something. And I'll share this because it'll lead into how when we end, I want to share one ritual for people that has really changed my life. But before that, I'll say this. Ultimately, we trust ourselves because we love ourselves, and we don't trust ourselves because we lack love for ourselves. So how is it that you create more love for yourself? And it's been the root of so much therapy and philosophy and writing and for so long, and even in religious teaching. And so to me, it's about self-care. This is how it's distilled for me, and this is what I've shared with folks, that when you take care of yourself, you teach yourself something about love. When we were kids, the last time for most of us that we really understood what unconditional love looks like is when we were too young to remember it, which is when we were learning to walk. If you remember that time, that's great. I don't, but we have 4 kids, so when kids are learning to walk, they fall down all the time. They fall down all the time. They don't walk. They stand and flop. They stand and flop. They stand and fall into things. You know, I've never seen a parent, the best or the worst of them, that ever looked at their kid who was falling down at that age and said, "Oh, you'll never walk. What a loser!" Right? You're just like, I can't even believe. Can you believe you're my kid? Like, nobody ever does that. There's no judgment. That all there is in that moment is unconditional acceptance of that child in that moment for where they are in the process of learning and growing. And we all know when we look at them that someday, pretty soon, they're going to learn how to get it right. They're going to walk. They're going to fall a zillion times, and then they're going to crawl and stand up and hold on to the table that you don't want them to fall into, and then booyah, they're just going to walk. And that's what's been missing for us since then. So our emotional development was impacted thereafter, and we won't get into that in this particular call, I know. But we've learned that love is not unconditional. It's conditional. When we're good, we love ourselves. When we are good, other people love us. When we're bad, when we say we're bad, when we're in that state of judgment, then we don't. We withhold love. So it's conditional. And therefore, we don't ultimately learn what it takes to trust ourselves. So what you described about taking time off and taking, putting the phone down, and doing something that nurtures yourself, nurtures your soul, that teaches you more about love than you've probably known in many ways throughout your life. And by learning that and being in that, you get to trust. You get to trust in that process, trust in yourself, which only helps you to be more trustworthy. And therefore, other people will trust you, want to work with you, do business with you,
and I was going to say, and then everything starts to fall in line, right? And serendipitously.
And things then things magically start to change, and you go, holy smokes, how did this happen?
Right. We are getting to the top of our hour. Ritual. What ritual can you leave us with as we head into the holidays, as we head into 2018, that you feel is going to be impactful for us?
Well, I've got a couple of things here. Okay. So first of all,
you've got 21 things in your book actually, but we only have time for 2.
I know, but I won't do that. So look, if your people are interested in the book, self-promotion, I guess, to say it, but you can get the book obviously on Amazon, and I hope you do enjoy it. I think it would make a
great
wonderful holiday gift.
It's a great gift. Actually, that's 100% correct. If there's someone in your life, maybe you're content with where you're at right now, career-wise or relationship-wise, but you know of someone that isn't, and maybe could use a little inspiration and a little guidance. This is a fabulous Christmas gift. Yes, good. Keep plugging.
Beautiful. All right. Well, I'll do it really fast. I want to give folks a gift, so a holiday gift ahead of this would be that if they wanted to join a community that will help them to meet them where they are in their pivot. It's really amazing what we've seen happen among other people that are in this space, the support, the sharing of information and story and resource in a vulnerable way. So we have a Facebook group called Start My Pivot community on Facebook. And what I'd love is that people would actually go to a particular starter point, which is where we give you 6 questions that you can determine, use the questions, and it's totally free, to determine whether or not you're in a pivot. Like, is this a pivot coming or a pivot that you're in right now? So again, by design or by default. And so if you go to startmypivot.com, it'll not only enable you to click on the icon to join the Facebook group, also to get access to the podcast and many incredible recordings there of thought leaders like John Assaraf and Lisa Nichols. We just had one with her the other day. The podcast is amazing. That's at startmypivot.com. And then the last thing, before I give you this ritual, is that there are some people that just love learning the way I love learning. And we had something we put together. It's taken us many months, and our team's been so happy to do it. And I've driven them crazy along the way because I have sort of a pseudo-perfectionist
high expectations
that I'm still working on. Right. But if you go to Join Pivot, so JOIN pivot.com, joinpivot.com, you will see that we've got a 15-module, beautiful, talk about a holiday gift for yourself or for a loved one. But the pivot process that we're talking about, I took it from the book and have taught it for thousands of people all over the world, and in live settings over 3 and 4 days and things. And we decided that there's a lot of people that, their best bet right now is to sit down and learn something and absorb and be curious, and with worksheets and forms and things to really solidify the process. And so 15 modules later, that's what we've got on joinpivot.com, and we hope people will love it and take advantage of it. And one of the things that they'll discover is the power of ritual. So I want to give you this one ritual that I hope if the listeners do nothing else, that you try this on for size for yourself, because I truly believe it's life altering. So tomorrow, everybody wakes up. Okay? That's the magic wand moment right here, Katerina, right? That we all wake up, because in the moment, I know it sounds funny. What is it? Oh, yeah, of course, we're going to wake up, right? Well, first of all, we're not guaranteed tomorrow. I'm not, you're not, none of us are. And when we take that first breath in the morning, when we realize we're waking up and we're alive and we're taking a breath, a conscious breath, we can all realize in that moment that there are other people everywhere around the world who are taking their very last breath. And so that makes that moment, that breath, holy and sacred and special, and it's not without purpose. So if for no other reason, whether your life is feeling blessed or you're feeling challenged now, when you wake up tomorrow, and that's my hope for all of us listening, everybody it's a part of this, that we all wake up tomorrow, that you feel gratitude in that moment. So part 1 is waking up, and part 2 is feeling grateful for anything in that moment, including that breath. And thirdly, that you declare out loud something that will change your perspective, change your perception of yourself, of the world even. And it's about that self-love. And those words are, I love my life. I love my life. I love my life. And that's the 3-part ritual that starts my day for many years, and I've taught it all over the world. And people say that they just did it for 21 days, and then it was a ritual that became a habit, and it's changed things.
And how fabulous if you can genuinely get to a point where you can say, I love my life. I mean, that is such a blessing. And so very, very important. I think that's a fabulous way to move into the new year. Adam Markel, thank you so very much for taking the time to be on our program.
Oh, you know what? such a blessing, Katerina. And again, I know you're streaming this on Facebook, and again, at the risk of sounding like I'm hawking, what I love about Facebook was we teach people how to utilize that as a marketing tool, is the fact that it's community. It's just such a deep, rich community that can be created. So our Start My Pivot community is wonderful, and I look forward to connecting with your listeners there on their challenges and where they're at, and even the things that they're planning for 2018.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm sorry to push you. My producers are giving me the signal. We are out of time. Adam Markel, lovely to have you. Everyone, pivot and reach out to Adam and his team. They know what they're doing. You are a blessing as well, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Take care.
Lots of love.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. All right, guys. So great. So great. So if you're at a place, regardless of where you're at, and you know that it's time to do something great with your life, just take a step, take a breath, say that your life is awesome, and just go ahead and do it. Pivot, Adam Markel. I'm Katerina Cozias here, LA40 on LA Talk Radio. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.